She boarded like she owned the sky, heels clicking, diamonds flashing, confidence sharp enough to cut. He boarded quietly, hoodie neat, boarding pass in hand, ready for another flight, another meeting, another day he'd earned. But the moment their paths crossed in first class, everything stopped. A single seat, 2 lives, and one assumption that would ignite a storm the world couldn't look away from. She thought she was putting a man in his place. She had no idea whose seat she'd just stolen. But what happened next would turn a moment of arrogance into a global reckoning no one saw coming. Darius Cole wasn't the kind of man people expected to make headlines. Quiet, deliberate, and impossibly focused. He built his success one early morning and late night at a time. At 38, he had turned a struggling airline into one of the fastest-growing carriers in the country. To most, he was just another passenger on another flight. Calm, composed, blending in. But that was exactly how he liked it. No entourage, no designer suit. Just a man who believed respect didn't need to be worn to be earned. That morning, the world outside his penthouse window was calm. His assistant had sent over the itinerary. Seattle to D.C., Flight 932, Seat 2A. He smiled when he saw it. The CEO's seat. Reserved on every domestic route. A tradition he'd started himself. He packed light. A gray hoodie, black jeans, laptop, phone. Simplicity was his armor. He had learned long ago that comfort could disarm judgment, until it didn't. The car ride to the airport was uneventful, the terminal line short, the morning crowd half awake. No one stared. No one whispered. Not yet. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, the smell of jet fuel and coffee hit him, a familiar comfort. He glanced at his ticket once more, unaware that in less than 10 minutes, this ordinary flight would become a mirror held up to an uncomfortable truth about power, privilege, and perception. He thought it was just another trip for business. But this flight was about to take him somewhere he never planned to go. If he had known what awaited him in Seat 2A, he might have missed his flight entirely. When Darius stepped into the cabin, the low hum of conversation and soft jazz music wrapped around him. First class smelled faintly of leather, citrus sanitizer, and quiet privilege. He moved down the aisle, boarding pass in hand, eyes scanning for 2A. There was window seat, second row, waiting. Except it wasn't. A woman was already there, legs crossed, pearls gleaming under the overhead light. Her white suit practically glowed against the navy leather seat. She didn't look up when she spoke. "You're in the wrong section." At first, Darius thought he'd misheard her. The words were so casual, so confident, they almost sounded routine. He checked the pass again. 2A, clear as day. He smiled politely and gestured toward the number above her head. But her eyes met his then, sharp and cold. "I said, you're in the wrong section." The air shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. A few heads turned, curious. Others looked away, pretending not to see. A man in a suit adjusted his earbuds. A woman lowered her magazine just enough to watch. Darius stayed calm. Years of practice. Years of holding his composure. When the world demanded he prove his place. He spoke softly, showing her the ticket. She didn't look at it. Instead, she tilted her chin higher, as if to remind him of what she thought she already knew. When the flight attendant approached, relief flickered through him. Brief, fragile. Her name tag read Chloe, her smile type rehearsed. She didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't check the boarding pass. She looked at him once, at his hoodie, at his skin, and said, "Sir, economy is behind you." It wasn't just the words. It was the ease with which he said them, the assumption, the authority, the certainty that he couldn't belong here. Darius handed over the boarding pass again, calm, steady. Chloe didn't take it. "Please move, sir," she repeated. "We're preparing for departure." The woman in the seat smirked, eyes glinting like she'd won something. "See," she said, loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. "They'll handle it." The humiliation was surgical, public, precise, the kind designed to make you doubt your own truth. Around them, phones began to tilt up, quietly, secretly. Someone was recording. Darius didn't move. He couldn't. His hands were still. his expression unreadable. Inside, though, something ancient stirred, the weight of every time he'd been told to wait, to leave, to explain himself to someone who never had to explain anything. The silence grew thick, alive. Each second stretched into an eternity. Chloe's voice rose again, this time sharper. "Sir, I'll have to call security if you refuse to cooperate." And still, Darius said nothing. To the people watching, he might have seemed frozen, but silence was his protest, his refusal to perform. In row 3, a teenage girl whispered her phone. Her camera was live now. Viewers started joining. Comments rolled in like waves. "He's showing his ticket. They're ignoring him. This is insane. What year is this?" Darius stood tall, not angry, not desperate, but sure. He wasn't just a man denied his seat. He was a man denied his own identity, and that made this more than a misunderstanding. Rebecca, her name tag caught the light, leaned back inside. Some people always try to take what's not theirs. A few passengers flinched. Chloe pretended not to hear. But the phone cameras caught everything. The tone, the smirk, the quiet comfort of entitlement. Darius looked down at his watch. The second hand ticked forward. He didn't raise his voice, didn't plead, because this wasn't about one flight. It was about every invisible rule written between the lines of polite society, the kind that told him where he could stand, sit, or exist. And still, no one intervened. The captain's voice crackled faintly over the intercom, announcing final boarding. The timing felt cruel. Chloe straightened, clipboard in hand, ready to call for backup. The woman in 2A shifted, settling deeper into the seat that wasn't hers. Darius took a slow breath and reached into his pocket. Phone zoomed in. Every eye was on him now. The tension was unbearable, like static before a lightning strike. He pulled out his phone, not to call security, not to plead his case. His fingers moved with calm precision across the screen. A soft glow reflected off his face. Rebecca frowned. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. Not yet, but his silence carried power, the kind that makes the guilty start to question what they've done. For the first time since this began, the balance shifted. Something unseen but undeniable had changed in the air. And when he finally looked up, there was no anger in his eyes, only certainty. He had let them define him long enough. Now, he was about to remind them exactly who he was. What happened next would flip every assumption on its head, and no one on that plane would ever forget it. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The engines hummed softly, but the air inside that cabin was electric, thick with disbelief, fear, and the quiet hum of exposure. Darius's phone screen glowed faintly in his palm, the corporate logo shining like a spotlight in the darkness. The same logo embroidered on every uniform around him. Orion Air. Rebecca's smirk faltered first. Then came the whisper. "What is that?" Her voice was quieter now, trembling just beneath its own arrogance. Darius lifted the phone, not as a threat, but as truth made visible. On the screen, clear as daylight. "Welcome, Darius Cole, CO." The silence broke like glass. Gasps rippled through first class. Chloe froze mid-motion, clipboard slipping from her hand. Jacob, the lead attendant, appeared from the galley, confusion tightening his face. "What's going on here?" Darius turned the screen slightly so everyone could see. The app interface, black and silver, executive tier access codes running across the top. "You wanted to see my credentials," he said quietly. "Now you're looking at them." Rebecca blinked. That can't be real." But her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Every ounce of practiced superiority drained out of her posture. Chloe stepped forward, pale and uncertain. "Sir, I didn't realize." "You didn't want to realize," Darius replied, voice still even, still calm. "You looked at me, made a decision, and didn't think twice about it." Every phone in the cabin was recording now. The teenage girl's live stream was still rolling, comments exploding faster than she could read. Asterisk, he's a CEO. Asterisk, no way. This just flipped everything. She told the owner to go back to economy. Darius didn't move. He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He just let the truth sit there, heavy and undeniable. The captain called from the cockpit. cabin ready for takeoff, but no one answered. The authority in that cabin had just shifted, and everyone could feel it. Chloe finally looked at the boarding pass still in Darius's hand, the one she'd refused to check minutes ago. Seat 2A, his name printed in bold. Her breath caught. She looked at him, eyes wide with realization, shame, and something deeper, regret. Jacob swallowed hard, sensing the fallout. "Mr. Cole," he began, his voice careful now, deferential. "Please allow us to finish what you started?" Darius interrupted softly. His tone wasn't cruel, but it carried weight. "No, you've done enough." Rebecca sank back into the seat, her confidence unraveling. "I didn't mean you meant every word," Darius said. "You just didn't expect consequences." The door to the jet bridge opened. 2 airport security officers stepped in, one black, one Asian, badges glinting in the overhead light. They'd been called for a disruptive passenger. But one glance at the phone screen told them everything they needed to know. "Ma'am," the officer said to Chloe, his tone clipped professional, "did you verify this passenger's identity before calling us?" Her mouth opened, then closed. "No, sir." "Then this isn't a disruption," he said flatly. "It's discrimination." The word landed like a hammer. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Rebecca's diamond bracelet clinked as her hands trembled. Chloe took a step back, tears welling in her eyes. Jacob lowered his head. And through it all, Darius remained composed. His silence was no longer defensive. It was authoritative. This wasn't a man trying to prove himself. This was a man reminding everyone who they were talking to. The officer nodded once. "Mr. Cole, would you like to press charges?" Darius looked around the cabin. The faces that had watched him silently moments ago now stared with guilt and awe. He took a slow breath. "No," he said, "not today. But this won't disappear when the cameras stop." The world outside that plane didn't know it yet, but the story was already spreading. Screens lighting up across time zones, hashtags forming, outrage rising. Within hours, it would dominate headlines. Within minutes, it would define careers. Rebecca's lips parted, as if to apologize, but no sound came out. Chloe's hands shook as she fumbled with her headset. The weight of their actions settled like a storm cloud that would not move. Darius finally sat, asterisk's seat, 2A, and looked out the window as the engines began to roar. He didn't need to say another word. The entire plane was listening. The world was watching, and the reckoning had just begun. But what came next wouldn't just change a flight. It would change an entire industry. When the plane finally touched down, the world had already changed. The video was everywhere, shared, dissected, debated. Headlines called it the flight that shattered first class. But for Darius, it was never about headlines. It was about truth. The airline he built released a statement within hours, acknowledging what happened and promising reform. But no press release could erase the look in Chloe's eyes, the quiet complicity of the passengers who had watched in silence, or the centuries-old reflex that had written him out before he ever spoke. Rebecca resigned the next morning. Chloe was suspended. Yet the real reckoning wasn't in the punishments. It was in the conversations that followed. People began to question how often respect is decided by skin tone, by clothing, by an assumption that still poisons quiet corners of power. Darius didn't speak publicly for weeks. When he finally did, his words weren't angry. They were heavy with truth. You can't train empathy into policy. You have to feel the cost of what it means to be unseen. His story sparked global awareness campaigns, diversity audits, and open letters. But beneath the noise, he knew millions of others would never have a platform, never have proof, never be believed. His experience became a mirror, and everyone had to face their reflection, because racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smiles, serves coffee, and says you're in the wrong seat. So maybe the real question isn't how this could happen on a plane, but how many times it happens in silence, unseen, every single day. And when we witness it, when it happens right in front of us, will we stay seated or finally stand up